Hello and welcome to today's panel on wholesale CBDCs. Today, we're covering the most recent developments in central bank digital currencies, specifically in those that are a digital liability of a central bank only accessible by eligible entities. Examples for such entities would be depository institutions, or to put it in simple terms, banks, and those that hold accounts with central banks of either a currency union or countries. Wholesale CBDCs could allow for new technical capabilities and arrangements in interbank payments, specifically in clearing and settlement processes. And also a couple of examples that are often quoted are the use of tokenized platforms, programmability, and composability. But the big question arises that given the fact that central bank liabilities are already provided to depository institutions, that's nothing new. Where exactly is the added value when it comes to wholesale CBDCs? Another interesting aspect is that tokenization is technically also related rather to the platform or the transfer mechanism of a payment and not really the settlement asset in itself. So that is, considering these facts, how would one answer the question whether they are even necessary for payments and security settlements of the future? These are just some of the questions that our esteemed panelists will be diving into today and share their experiences on that they have gathered throughout their careers and working on this topic every single day. Before we get started, I would like to express our thanks to our DIA members that take discussions with us and also make them possible in the first place, especially a big thank you to our gold member, Ripple. Our panels are meant as a platform for exchange, which is why we encourage all of you in the audience to actively listen in and ask those questions in the YouTube chat box that you want to have answered during this panel today. With that being said, I will now turn it over to our esteemed guests, Dr. Jan Rosam, Dr. Holger Meffert, Johannes Duong, and Kevin Spur. Welcome to all of you. And Kevin, why don't you start by giving us an overview of your work at the DSGV and how it relates to wholesale CBDCs, if you don't mind?
I don't mind, I can do it. Hi, I'm Kevin. I'm a project manager in the project Digital Currencies and Digital Assets in DSGV. In the meantime, the question around digital currencies, especially retail CBDC or wholesale CBDC, took such a political thrive that I mainly work in the topics digital euro, retail CBDC, and also wholesale CBDC, where some of our member institutes are involved. I'm very happy to participate in this live stream because I still remember before I was working in another banking association, 2018 to 2021. And also at this point, wholesale CBDC, retail CBDC, the discussion started. And if you look how this topic got broader and broader, how the academic discussions, political discussions got more and more active, then it's really thriving to be in such a development and discussion here now. Yes, thank you.
Certainly, and if I'm not mistaken, you also have quite a lot of practical knowledge that they bring to the table, especially recent ones. So excited to hear about your experiences there, especially about those in the Eurozone. Jan, why don't you go next with introducing yourself?
Yeah, happy to do so. Thanks, Sarah, for the introduction and also for the invite to this panel. Yeah, Jan Rosam, I'm a partner at EY here in Frankfurt. And I lead our digital asset, digital currency practice in EMEA in Europe. And so what's my angle to wholesale CBDC? So I think we have been involved quite early already in the, let's say, digital currency space, not just in Germany but also in Europe, and the very early discussions on, do we need a different form of money? How could it look like? And so therefore, we are engaged with a number of institutions in this discussion. So therefore, I'm also responsible for the digital euro within EY. So every question which comes up in this topic ends on my table somehow. So therefore, happy to give my view on the wholesale CBDC, which fits very nicely with the digital asset topic in general. So because today we will, as you probably already introduced, not talk so much about payment infrastructure for retail, it's more for interbank settlements. So, and that also fits in with the discussion on tokenized securities and how can we use DLT infrastructure on gaining efficiency when it comes to the settlement and operations of financial products or tokenized financial products. So therefore, that's also an area I'm quite involved. So nice to be here and looking forward to our discussion.
Great. It sounds like you'll be in the right spot to answer some of the questions that were already raised regarding the tokenization part of things. Holger, why don't you go next?
Thanks, Sarah. My name is Holger Meffert. I'm head of security services at DZ Bank. And so I'm formerly very interested in the traditional way of servicing securities through the entire life cycle. But I think since 6 weeks now, I'm also head of the digital custody, a custody solution where we think of really is DLT a possibility to be more efficient in dealing with securities or any other financial instruments, mostly involved in institutional business. And Jan was very helpful at this point because he and his colleagues helped us to get to this platform really in life, and we had several transactions now therefore, and had some first experience in dealing with the settlement part, and now we're longing for some solutions doing really to make a DVP process and the payment process. So I'm not mainly interested in the euro for itself, but mainly in the currency for really settling and financial instruments, either a security or any other typical financial instrument.
Great to have you, Holger. I think it's also fair to say that we're going to touch on the recent news coming out from DZ Bank just a couple of weeks ago on this very topic later on. And last but certainly not least, Johannes, why don't you introduce yourself?
Thank you. Johannes Duong, my name, from Australian National Bank. So I'm working in the Treasury Department in back office, so responsible for security settlement, cash management, and we work every day with SWIFT and so on for instructions. And in the recent year, we have started in doing a lot of research and experiments with blockchain in context of digital assets, and of course the topic wholesale CBDC for settlement is a topic in our institution. And for us it's important to build up our know-how internally and to be prepared for the impact, what could happen in the future. And we can see there's a disruption, and more than 100 central banks worldwide are doing experiments with wholesale CBDCs and digital assets and tokenization. So we also, in our institution, we have an innovation lab. In the innovation lab, we can start proof of concept projects together with other departments or other institutions. So we started our project Delphi, in which we experiment with the tokenization of an existing Austrian government bond and a wholesale CBDC. But it's important, it's only a sandbox that we are try to do experiments, and we are also not intend to issue a wholesale CBDC because it is the task of a ECB, not of the ONB, because we are part of the Eurosystem. But what we can do is we can do a lot of research and to learn and build up our know-how, exchanging with other institutions, and to find out what could be the impact in the future to the financial market.
Thank you, Johannes. I think it's fair to say that the Austrian National Bank is on the forefront of these discussions. They seem to be very, very active, giving presentations on what it means for banks for digital euro to be introduced. And as you already touched on, you yourself also have a lot of projects going on in this area. For example, the NFT Metaverse one that you already presented during one of our events, which was the Techie Tuesday episode, for anyone that's interested. All right, after having a good picture of everybody's background, I think it's time to actually start with our discussion on wholesale CBDCs and whether they're actually tomorrow's case for payments and security settlements. It is obvious that there's more transaction volume that is being handled via these systems today than there is in the retail market, which is very interesting if you look at how the news are distributed. It appears that we hear more about the retail CBDC, even though arguably there's not so many new developments coming out. So with that kind of imbalance or discrepancy happening, what would you say, where do we currently stand with wholesale CBDCs worldwide in their development? Is this just something that's warped by our perception that we hear more about retail CBDCs? Is there actually more going on behind the scenes for wholesale CBDCs? How do you see these topics? And Kevin, why don't you start with giving us your impression?
To answer your question, well, maybe it's because of our perception, because of course, like a retail CBDC, for example, the digital euro, which is public digital money for all, can have much more, or can be much more famous, you know, than a very specialized wholesale CBDC between banking institutions. And of course, the news are more covered by retail CBDC. Nevertheless, I think there is some development worldwide. So I checked the Great CBDC Tracker. I think currently there are 55 wholesale CBDC projects and 7 pilots, which are already started. And also in the eurozone, you know, a long time the ECB just focused on retail CBDC, but there were many opinions and voices who said, well, maybe start with a wholesale CBDC, or wholesale CBDC could be easier to implement. It's like a technical adjustment. And nowadays, I think in June or May this year, the ECB founded or has started a market contact group for wholesale settlement technologies. And the German Bundesbank founded a mirror group to mirror the contents and to accompany the ECB. And yeah, I think now even in the eurozone there is some movement regarding wholesale CBDC and some drive.
Yeah, no, I think I fully agree with what you said, Kevin. So that, of course, from a publicity perspective, the retail CBDC, of course, has a much wider perception, also given the current political discussions, as you elaborated early on. However, I think the wholesale CBDC idea has been discussed a long while back already. I mean, we should remember that also German Bundesbank was involved in the Blockbuster project and also did very early on pilot transactions with Deutsche Börse. And we also saw that in the European investment banking issuances they did a while back, that also there was a trial on wholesale CBDC. And Banque de France, I think, from my perspective, were the earliest adapter who issued, I think, already 2 years back, first pilots with French banks on exploring the possibility on whether it makes sense to have a wholesale CBDC or not. So I think the experiments were probably known to us in the, let's say, capital market space, but maybe not in the press. But I think at least, but Johannes is nicking. So I think it's a long way, and I think it's quite fortunate to be in the eurozone, to be honest, because when we talk about which of these projects are already live, then there are not so many which come to my mind. So we can discuss this. So, and I think next year we will see, hopefully, also being able for banks to do live transactions. Let's see. So it goes back for a while. So I think there's a lot of building going on in the background, which is not so publicly known, I would say.
Johannes, you coming from a national bank,
Yeah.
what would you say about that?
But that's Kevin and also Jan, they mentioned already. Many things, I think many national banks, they are just like us. They have an innovation hub or innovation lab. They are experimenting a lot, but maybe they do not communicate so actively. But I'm sure what an important point is from our experience up to now with the wholesale CBDC or tokenized assets, it's one of the big questions are the business cases behind it. When you know, because security settlement at the moment T+0 is also possible via the CSD, Central Security Depository, right? Because when you say it's T+0, it works, yeah. But the thing is, when using a blockchain, of course, there you can reduce intermediaries, you can make the settlement more efficient. That's all true, but of course, the question is of the scalability behind it. Yeah, when for example you have a blockchain introduced, I mean, it's not cheap, right, to integrate it in a financial institution, and you have 5 transactions a day. The question is then, okay, is a blockchain really necessary for that? So one of the big questions is the scalability and more the business cases, not the technological problem here, because technologically we know that works definitely. So the scalability is the question, the business cases, what could be the new market, and what are the costs a financial institution can save or reduce using blockchain DLT in comparison to the legacy system. And all, I think from all the years the experience, the technical part is not a big problem. The follow-up questions are are more the challenging, yeah, when the number of transactions per day and legal framework, there are legal obstacles and so on. All these, we found out there are much more discussions, much more difficult from my personal perspective at the moment. Yeah, these are all these more questions.
You're bringing up what's being asked in the background, and several central banks worldwide right now already, not just in the eurozone. Holger, what developments do you see worldwide when it comes to wholesale CBDCs?
Well, I think the point at the wholesale CBDC is not the payment itself. It's the question what, as Johannes said, what problem to solve and make it more efficient. And therefore, we have to step a bit back, either in contrast to the retail stuff, where you have really the payment, which is clear regulatory framework, which is quite easy. There are some small things to look at, but to adopt to this change, that it's quite an easy thing, and you have massive volumes, meaning the number of transactions. On the institutional side, the wholesale point, you have to find the use cases, you have to find the financial transactions you have to solve, and there's a point if you have to configure a financial transaction, to do it in a new technology, you have to find the counterparts using the same technology. Johannes said it. It's not the reason. It's not the real point to say how does a bond works on DLT. That's quite simple. It works since 5 years, 6 years ago. That's no problem. But having counterparts who really recognize, okay, this is a standard or this is a framework we both use. That's the entire question, because a lot of institutions think about, is this the right way? The budgets to implement some systems to build the bridge between the DLT system and your legacy system, because the legacy system is still needed. That's not the point. But to have a key management software which interlinks these both, this is not cheap, especially if you are not in the sandbox. If you are in a production environment and you have to reflect any of the regulatory requirements, that's quite important, and all of the counterparts have to reflect this. And so therefore I think we are quite at the starting point, really, to get a field where some of the participants go in the same direction. There's a lot of movement, but there's a lot of movement which is not really in a constrained way, especially all the huge US banks. They have their own platforms, and I don't really think if they are thinking of interconnecting them. But this is the point we have to do. If we really think of networks, we have to find a standard, or even at least more than one standard, but a small number of that, and to build either the securities world or any other financial instrument on these standards. And we have to do this first, and then you can really find a solution for the wholesale CBDC in the final state, because this is the last point we have to do, and we have to make a lot of work along this road. And therefore, I'm really happy that the ECB recognized that and started the NTWCG in beginning of this year, and really make the possibility to participate to the exploratory work in next year. Whereas they really give them a way of working together with different solutions. If the solutions are perfect, doesn't matter, but working together with other counterparts on a solution, find a way to interact on the instrument part and get a solution for the payment part. And I think this is the starting point, hopefully, to get a more focused direction in the market.
Yeah, very interesting. The discussions around on what layer you're settling and so on. I imagine there's a lot of mismatch right now. So we see the same interoperability discussion popping up apparently here. Holger, from what you're saying, that we also see with the other solutions that we see with tokenized deposits, that we see with retail CBDCs. Johannes, can I ask you regarding using DLT as an infrastructure for wholesale CBDC, since you already touched on this, would this actually be beneficial for banks and also for central banks from your perspective?
So, of course, using a DLT, as I mentioned before, has efficiency with the settlement. You can reduce the settlement cycles and system interruptions and intermediaries. That's all fine. That's all something that technologically works. But as I mentioned before, is the scalability, and also Holger mentioned how many institutions would join this platform or this technology to make sense. And in case of using DLT, I think there is not only one DLT type. There are many DLTs: public chain versus permission chain and second layer solutions. All these, they need an interoperability. And the question is, using DLT was the idea to reduce system interruptions and fragmentation. But now, if we have too many DLTs, we are going back to the root where we have different protocols and platforms and technology. Maybe this could also reduce the efficiency of the DLT. So this question is, it depends some factors: scalability and how many institutions or participants will join this. And to have that using a DLT or a blockchain is full power, then it should be everything on a same platform, and the less system breaks, interruptions, the better for that. Otherwise, you will come to new challenges. Who is responsible for the gateways? Then you came to also legal questions when you have cross-border settlement, in example, using two DLTs. So the question is, who is in the middle? Who is responsible if the token disappears or whatever happens? Who is responsible for what? Who is responsible in the gateway between the two DLT or more, for example? All these questions, I think, need to clarify before you can answer this question. So, yeah.
I would like to make a short remark to that, because from my point of view, it's not the question, is it reasonable that the wholesale CBDC is on DLT? The question is, do we have settlement of anything on a DLT basis? If so, we have to have a wholesale CBDC also on DLT basis. But if we don't find any real use case either for securities or any other instrument on DLT basis, there's no need for a wholesale CBDC. It's this way around. But if we have one, then, as Johannes already mentioned, it is heavily necessary that this coin has to be on-chain to minimize interoperability problems, to minimize fractions, and really to get the final step. But this is really the final step and not the first one.
Yeah, so I don't know, maybe we come to this later on the design principles of the wholesale CBDC which has also been laid out by the Euro. In the eurozone, there has been multiple publications about how a potential solution could look like, and you will find there are some national central banks who believe that it's not necessary to have an, let's say, tokenized wholesale CBDC. So that's the reason why we talk about these what we call trigger solutions. So where at the end of the day you don't have like a token type of money, you just trigger from your smart contract payment directly into the existing infrastructure. So therefore, I think as Johannes and Holger was saying, there are multiple solutions how you could solve it technically. So therefore, there's no technical issue in that sense. So we have variety, and I think also in the euro area there have been multiple pilots and multiple investigations on different design principles of wholesale CBDC. But it's, as Holger said, the question is what actually is going to be used by the industry, and I think that's still an open question which needs to be discussed. So some in the market lean towards a trigger solution is enough. Others lean towards we need a tokenized form of wholesale CBDC, and I think that's still an open question. So. And it comes with a lot of legal questions and regulatory questions actually also. So because just to mention one, if let's say the industry would operate their own network and the central bank would basically bring their wholesale CBDC into this network, then there are a lot of questions around governance mainly. So who is responsible for this network, and also on how is this money floating in this network? So it very quickly becomes complex, not from a technical perspective, but from a regulatory perspective and also legal perspective. But we will see. So my understanding, but I mean, Holger and Johannes are closer to the discussion. So there will be exploration next year. And I'm really looking forward to see what comes out. And I think I can only encourage as many institutions as possible to take part, because as Johannes was saying, if there's no interest, then the central banks will say, okay, no one needs this, so why do we need to build this infrastructure? So therefore, I think it's great to hear also that a lot of institutions are taking part next year in this exploration phase in Europe. And of course, just because you asked worldwide, I mean, one of the most advanced project, as I'm aware, is Finality in the UK. I mean, they have been working on a potential solution for many years now, and at least the Bank of England opened the door a little bit for them. I think that's definitely something to watch this project, because they have now integrated their solution into multiple networks. And I think that's also a great initiative. And it's DLT based.
It's DLT based, yeah. That's maybe also the reason the ECB in its NTDCG, or let's say in the testing, is focusing on 3 prototypes. Like first on the trigger solution by the German Bundesbank, as Jan mentioned. It's a trigger solution who triggers a target in essence. So a quite not old, but let's say conventional system. Secondly, they started the call of interest to test a wholesale CBDC based on TIPS hashlink. It's like a project from the Banca d'Italia. So the assets, they are on DLT, but then they trigger the TIP system. And the TIP system, as Johannes said, it's instant settlement. So it's not about the speed, which can be one, because we have TIPS, I think. It's more about, we have to find other use cases. Maybe during this discussion, we find the use cases, but it's not the speed nor the time you can settle. And third and last, they are testing on the basis of the Banque de France, and this would be a full DLT system. So that idea would behind that also the Eurosystem creates or emits a DLT, and that the assets on a DLT and that the settlement is on a DLT. So they are quite technology open at the current stage.
Yeah, assuming also for the testing done next year. France work is going to come in handy, as will Italy's actually. Jan, just because you touched on finality, and I think they just secured another really big round of funding in the billions actually. One must say, though, that they're not live yet. So a lot of these projects, also, if you look at those worldwide, are currently still in the proof of concept phase, even more in the research phase. Those that are in the proof of concept phase, for example, are Brazil and Canada, as well as Kazakhstan. Why do you think that is? What do they get stuck in? What are the concrete limitations that wholesale CBDC projects worldwide currently face?
Yeah, I think it's multiple dimensions. I mean, first of all, it's not easy to run a consortium of, I don't know, 15 institutions. I think that we have seen many initiatives, to be honest, in the DLT space, which failed, not because of technical reason, but of how to orchestrate these large consortiums. So I think that's, of course, holds you back. You need to spend a lot of time on governance and, I mean, who owns the IP if you produce a new product and you have 10 banks sitting on the table. So I think that's definitely something which wouldn't say hold them back, but definitely is considerable amount of time goes into that. I think technically they are quite okay for a long time. I think what at least my understanding is what held them back is really the access to the central bank. So because at the end of the day, they produce a system which aims to settle into an wholesale CBDC, or let's say in some time of account structure in central bank money. So that means the central banks need to open up for them and say, okay, we allow you to participate in our system, and we allow you to be part of our infrastructure. And I think that's a big step for a central bank. At least when I talk to central bankers, this is basically a big hurdle. So and a lot of questions start very early. What Johannes said is like, why do you need this? I mean, what's the business case? We have the infrastructure. So that's the basic. That's the first discussion. And then, of course, they need to improve on technology. They need to integrate into the system, et cetera, et cetera. And there's a lot of questions about governance. Basically, what happens if something goes wrong? I mean, who's responsible for this, et cetera. So, and I think that discussion has taken so long. That's at least my perception. And I mean, it's just the Bank of England who opened up the doors for them yet. So I mean, and I'm pretty sure they ranked, they were quite often at ECB or in other central banks, but it seems they are not so open. So yeah, I think it's for the central banks, it feels that the central banks have a high hurdle to be part of the infrastructure, and I think that's why they are probably not live yet, not fully live. Yeah.
May I jump in? So thank you for this. So Jan, absolutely, the business cases is one of the most important. So that's what we also discussing in our Delphi stakeholders with other commercial banks. The technical part is the easiest part, and the business part is one of the most difficult. That to justify using DLT, that to have a use case, and of course the legal obstacles, because using the wholesale CBDC maybe within one country, the thing is this really really necessary, because the power behind it is the cross-border, for the cross-border using and so on. And of course there are lots of legal hurdles and so on, and that's why I think it's so difficult. Not the technical is the biggest issue. It's, I think, from my personal view, the easiest part is the technical part, and the legal business cases risk, as you mentioned, Jan, absolutely, who is responsible for what. And of course, when you're working together with a consortium with many institutions, the intellectual property right, who belongs to what, who pays what, and so on, all these are lots of challenges. And this is something that we also had in our Delphi project at the beginning with discussions, intellectual property right, and so on. It takes more than the proof of concept itself then finally, and all these points are I think the questions that need to be answered.
Are there any additional thoughts from your side, Holger or Kevin, on limiting factors of wholesale CBDC projects?
Well, the one thing is, I wouldn't agree perfectly. Technically, from a real technical point of view, that's not the real issue to connect to any kind of network using different kind of protocols. But really, from the business part, to do the invest and really have a platform which is able to connect on a real productive environment with any kind of security standards, with any kind of law applicability and stuff like that. And that's a mess. That's a mess that it's a huge investment, and it has nothing to do with a sandbox. But that's the point. You have to jump over this hurdle. And the question is, when do you have enough motion really to jump over the hurdle and say, yes, okay, we are willing to invest in an infrastructure, and we don't know if the business case ever gets positive. That's obvious, and this is I think it's a board decision of any institute, and to really to give some kind of direction. And this is the point. This investment has to be done, and it's also the one Johannes mentioned quite at the beginning, that he said, okay, there's also a point of competence of the resources dealing with the topic, and so you have to invest in technology and in human resources, and that's a topic which is not that easy to handle in these times for, let's say, for the general financial institutes, which have to take care of their budgets, especially in those risky times. So there are some I think it's a puzzle of problems you have. It's not the thing as you see if you look at the Bitcoin world. It's quite easy if you have enough clients really to invest in that, and you need some retail clients, then the infrastructure is quite simple, and you can do the topic, I think, quite for a reasonable business case. But in the sense we are here, you're open. You have to think about different kind of networks. You have to really to invest not also in adopting to a network, but also really to ramp up a network together with others, because there are not that many cases out there, and at least no standard or even portions of a standard. And this is a thing you have to do. And nevertheless, I said, the central banks, they really take care of. They only need to invest in such kind of infrastructure, which they had to invest on their side, if there is enough demand on the other side. And so this is a hen-egg problem, and therefore I'm really, as I said before, I'm really glad that ECB tried to get a small step apart and tried this exploration phase next year. And as Jan said, we can already invite as many financial institutions as possible to really to take part of these phases, so that we really get a movement which is reasonable, and find counterparts really to define some standards and work on, and therefore raise the pressure on the national banks to invest on their side, either on the methodology and the infrastructure, to raise some wholesale CBDCs.
This is especially relevant, I would say, given the recent developments coming out from DZ Bank with your own custody platform. That is probably, or the same questions were asked and answered in the background regarding, is there enough momentum and so on. Can you speak to that at all, and how far the current moment was the right one for you to actually commit to setting up such a project such as this one, that is definitely one that takes a lot of consideration?
The problem is the point. You cannot decide now we're investing it, and then you're done. So you have to invest in an area which is quite uncertain, and you have to be quite open to find a way to adopt any kind of reasonable changes to that. And I think it was 4 years ago now that we had some kind of innovation lab at DZ really starting thinking about the topic, and it was also driven by myself, and I'm not only at the NTWCG, at the ECB sites, and also at the AMISECO, which is laying the infrastructure layer for the settlement of T2S and the collateral management stuff in the Eurosystem. And therefore, there was a working group which said, okay, we need in 8 to 10 years from inventing a new idea to really to bring them to production. And also, I wouldn't say that DZ we need 8 to 10 years, but nevertheless, and that's the framework you have to think about. What's in 10 years' time? If there's really reasonable that we go this way, and if there is a rational that there might be, then we have to invest. We cannot think about in 8 years' time. Oh, now in 2 years' time there's we had to ramp up some stuff. No, we had to build up. There's a lot of regulatory work to do. In Germany, there are some clear things about the licenses you have to get, and we're very glad we could talk about consultant companies or even foreign banks, that how close the regulatory framework in Germany is. For some parties it's too close, but for us it's quite we're quite happy about that, because we know what to do. Even though there are some things that, hey, is this really worth to be done? No, but you have the clear framework for that, and you are aware that this is the thing you are able to do, this is the thing you're not able to do. And so I think I'm really happy that board decided, I think it was 3 years ago now, really to invest, to giving the project and also the staff green light to that. And now we're really happy that, especially with Jan and his colleagues' help, really bring the platform to life 4 weeks ago now. And we're now able to be part of any kind of pilot transactions, and being able to discuss with the guys who were running, for instance, especially the securities business and the registries for securities. And the discussions we therefore see is we took part in some of the recent issuances, for instance, the Weltbank issuance from Euroclear. Quite a great idea, but it was a closed network. We haven't had the possibility really to get with our key management to take the wallet as our wallet. So there's a lot of things any of the participants have to think about, open up their networks and really to have a distributed one. But now since we have done 3, 4, 5 transactions now, we know about some of the real assets, some of the real issues we have, and I think the biggest one are not the technical ones. The biggest ones are really the regulatory ones, which is no problem, because we learned a lot about dealing with a concrete case in a concrete time frame, having lawyer compliance guys on the table, and really find a way to go on, although in some cases directly with the supervisors, and are aware what have to be clarified in the future. And so we're very happy really that we hopefully get more transaction in next year, where to get not only live to the environment, but also to get closer to real processes, not only on our side, but also on the side of the counterparts.
Thanks for sharing all of this. I guess this is these are the things you don't usually get to hear behind the scenes in those short articles that are just summarizing that you have launched and have had the first couple of transactions. Yeah, of course, all the best for the next year. I hope those projections come true, since, as you already mentioned, it was a big commitment to actually bring this to life. Moving on to our next question, which is paralleling or kind of comparing wholesale CBDC payments to the current systems that we have, specifically RTGS systems. Where do you see that these types of settlement processes are overlapping? Where are they similar? Where do they differ? Turning it over to Jan first, I would say.
Yeah, I can start to have a go. No, I think it's of course a super relevant question, and it's I think the the big question, also from a central bank perspective. So I think to put it a little bit in perspective, because as some of you know, there is a G7 initiative globally to let's say reform our current payment infrastructure. So I mean, I think globally it has been recognized that in order to have leaner payment infrastructure, some kind of adjustment needs to be done on some of these RTGS systems. And I think this is the issues can be different depending on the jurisdiction and the country you're in, or the area you're in. So therefore there is a question on whether a DLT infrastructure can help our wholesale CBDC. So, and I think there are different answers to it depending on the area. So just to give you an example, that I mean, in the US, there was a bank consortium around the concept which was called Regulated Liability Network, and that consortium, together with the innovation team from Fed, discussed a lot on tokenized commercial bank money. What do we need? What's the infrastructure? And I think the outcome is that they said, we would be. One potential use case would be to really have an instant 24/7 dollar settlement infrastructure. So therefore they saw that by using this infrastructure, maybe we could renovate and improve our current RTGS system and really develop an instant 24/7 always on, let's say, dollar settlement system, which you can roll out globally. So I think that's interesting as a result. So in other areas, of course, there was question more on cross-border payments. Can we use the infrastructure to improve cross-border payments, which is still very expensive from a cost perspective to settle cross-border. And therefore, if we would have the idea to have an DLT infrastructure, which is basically not bound to borders, of course, the idea would be much easier and slimmer to settle also cross-border, and that of course would also improve the existing infrastructure and would make the current system much more efficient than it is today. So therefore, I think there's at least the hope or the idea that maybe this infrastructure could help to improve the RTGS or the existing, let's say, the existing payment infrastructure. But again, I mean, as Johannes was saying, if we come back to Europe, I mean, we have T+0, we have SEPA Instant, so we have a lot of these technologies already in place. So therefore, maybe in Europe, the question is a bit harder to answer. In other countries, maybe it's a bit easier. And we have seen in Brazil, for example, they also launched a couple of projects to improve their infrastructure. So therefore, I think depending on where we are globally, there are definitely possibilities maybe to use the technology to improve, but it's really depends on the use case and the area we're in. Long answer to this question, but it's basically, as Johannes is saying, that's the gatekeeper question when you talk to the central banks. So like, okay, what's now better than it's, or if we go with the system, why is it better than what we have today? And that's the key question now. I don't know, maybe Johannes, did you agree with?
Yeah, so that's from the security settlement side. So this is a really big question, because we have our target system and for settlement of securities, and it's T+0, and that's and on a DLT you can also settle on T+0. So it's really a question because we have a good in Europe, you have such a really good infrastructure and technology. So the question is does the DLT really improve so much? And this is also one of the core questions, answering to really work out the advantage using DLT instead of the existing infrastructure, because from the CSD side, as far as we know, we can settle in T+0 at the moment. So with the real-time settlement, that's possible. So that's why it's quite difficult to really answer it using a DLT, and that's why we come back with the business cases. Maybe this is something that could help or to more argument using DLT are more the business cases size. And this is also the reason why we are trying to, from the digital asset side, we are trying to look into the market, working or exchanging with the market, beginning from decentralized finance to NFT. All these, what are the new business cases on that? Because for the efficiency side, because it's really hard to find out the advantage.
And so I mean, my view is you can't see it purely from the payment side. You need to see the whole structure, as you said, Johannes. I mean, and as Holger was saying that, because if we want to make the security settlement more efficient, then of course you would need the instant asset settlement and the instant cash settlement atomically at the same time. If we would be able to reach this, then the security settlement would be much more efficient. So, but so therefore, I think it's these combined use cases which I think the market is looking for. So where can we basically see this efficiency gain? And I think that, of course, would be super efficient. I mean, if we could in the repo market see T+0, all movements, etc. on the asset side, but also on the cash side at the same time, because all of the transaction we have seen so far, apart from very limited amount, they always settled the asset, but the cash side, they went via the existing payment rails. So, and if we could combine this, and I think then hopefully we will see really the gain of DLT.
Yeah, and to add on, because the settlement with atomic settlement, as you said, this is definitely the base use case for DVP or receiving versus payment atomically. But on top of it, we have corporate actions like coupon payments, redemption, partial settlement, and all this shortage, for example. Yeah, what if one counterparty cannot fulfill his obligations, and there are token shortage, he cannot. All these are on top of it, and all these are definitely the further use cases combined. What Jan, you said, this is the base use case, the ground use case, but on top of it we have much more than built on it. And that's why you're absolutely right to see it, the full image, the full picture, to see whether it's really using a DLT. Does it really make efficiency? That you have to all cover all these aspects and so on. And yeah.
I would like to add this remark, because this is really one extremely important thing, handling the entire life cycle of any financial instrument, especially a security, using DLT, using smart contracts. This is one important, that is not the point of having the cash on the side, but also using smart contracts. And having smart contracts in mind, you can think of a lot of more financial instruments than other securities. As DZ Bank, we had some guys who are inventing a swap on a DLT basis, trying to really figure out it in a way that they vanish the counterparty risk, because the value to market has been done in a different and much more transparent and obvious way. So you can vanish the margin calls and stuff like that. And if you combine these things, the programmable events of financial instruments, especially securities, but any other, together with programmability and combining different things, and that's my point of view from a security service guy or from an operation guy, really having different kind of instruments on the same platform, and not only securities, but also swaps, but also repos, which are really combined in their settlement chain, for instance, or in the life cycle. And this would be at the final step really a thing where I can think, if you go all the way, then you have some efficiency gains which are really remarkable, that you can really are paid for the real expensive infrastructure you have to run.
Kevin, do you have any additional thoughts on what our other panelists just said?
I just can agree, like instant settlement, it already exists. That's not the added value. There have to be found business cases. And I think some hurdle is also, I don't know if we mentioned it, it's some regulatory unclarity. I mean, in Germany, we have the law on electronic securities, EWPG, how you say it. It was published in 2021, and first it was just open for BERA instruments, and the content was you don't need a central party for the assets for BERA instruments. You can also emit it on a decentralized structure, let's say, not necessarily a DLT, but a decentralized structure. And now the government wants to extend this EWPGs, like this law on electronic securities, also on shares. Like it's in a bigger package. How you can translate it, like law on, and they want to foster private investments. And for this, they also want to make sure that shares can be emitted on a decentralized structure. There are some regulatory unclarities and even some regulatory prohibitive costs to do this. But I'm quite optimistic that at least the lawmaker will deal with this issue. And another good example for, I think, good law, in my opinion, is the DLT Pilot Regime, which started in March, I think, this year, and where companies can test solutions in a regulatory sandbox, and they can passport their solutions to other countries of the eurozone. And I think, but I'm excited for the opinions of the others. It's a very promising project to develop this technology further, and also to see regulatory hurdles, because sometimes the lawmaker also has to be made aware, of some problems. They don't always see it by themselves.
Yeah, I know that Singapore is also quite up there when it comes to offering sandbox solutions, hence why so many, especially companies in the crypto space, have actually moved there next to obviously the tax-related benefits of being there. So the DLT pilot regime is definitely a big topic. Why don't we turn to that here as well? Given that it's already been running for a couple of months, are there any learnings that you think we can already extract from the DLT pilot regime being live?
Okay, to be honest, I haven't heard up to now from any kind of real initiative which is up and running on the pilot regime. One thing is, as we said before, there's no standard or even some agreed standard alongside a small amount of counterparts about the adoption of a security. One thing. And second is these counterparts are not really not have connected to the network. And then there's a settlement point. And I hope that in next year, given the exploratory phase, that even for the eurozone, there are some ideas how to connect to the payment stuff so that you have really a DVP settlement, and that some of the networks really get up and running, and you have this the secondary market really up and running, because this is the only point which the DLT addresses. Primary market is no problem. You can already handle this as the World Bank emission, the EIB emission has largely shown. But there's the secondary market, and there you have to find the counterparts who really want to connect to this ecosystem, who really adopt the technical constraints given there. Then you have to implement the instruments on the chain, and then you can deal on them, and then you have to settle them. And so I think there's a long way to go. And as far as I know, probably Jan, especially, you might have more insights than me. I don't know. I'm not aware of any productive initiative currently so far.
Yeah, no, I think it's we could have another webcast on just the DLT pilot regime. So I guess no, but I agree, at least not at the moment. I think there are at least some concerns about the DLT pilot regime and the way how it's structured, and also with certain thresholds. However, at least what I have heard, but maybe it's just a rumor, the reason why the ECB and so coming out with the wholesale CBDC solutions also because of the DLT pilot regime, because under the DLT pilot regime, you are allowed to trade and in the secondary market transactions, and this also includes the settlement of the cash side. So therefore, I think it's also a bit of a puzzle which was missing so far was the cash side. Also, if you wanted to do really a live transaction on DLT pilot regime, that's at least my understanding. Why also the central banks have said, okay, maybe we need also for approval. So basically bringing more market participants into the DLT pilot sandbox, also to provide the settlement infrastructure for the cash side. So therefore, maybe then next year we will see transactions happening under the DLT pilot regime. But when we talk to financial institutions, there are not many who are really interested in the current framework, how it's structured. It's not super appealing. But it's the same with the wholesale CBDC. If no one takes part, then the regulators will say, okay, there was no interest from the market. So because we need to keep in mind, if this goes through, they need to change MiFID II, they need to change the CSDR. So it's a lot of regulation they would need to change to really make it into the current regulatory framework. So there will be a lot of work needed, and which would be a pity. I mean, if they scrap their plans after the sandbox to do it. So it's also here. I think it would be good if market participants really come up and join this, even if it's not a business case for the moment. So because it will not be a business case, at least until the end of the sandbox. I think regulators would need to give certainty on what happens after the DLT pilot regime, which is also unclear. So what happens afterwards? So therefore, adoption is low. I agree. Hopefully, the wholesale CBDC initiative will help next year, maybe to also the DLT pilot regime. But we will see.
So I'm talking to the market participants in Austria. We hear that some interest our participants, but mostly in Germany and in France. But the question that raised up, I think Jan, you just mentioned it. What happens after the DLT pilot? Because I think it's limited to 6 years, and after that there is, I think, no information what's happening, and that's why it's quite uncertainty in the institutions what's happening later, because they invest a lot on the infrastructure. It's something. It's a big investment, and there is an uncertainty what's happening after the DLT pilot phase. That's why maybe this is could be one of the reason, as you mentioned, why they stay passive. And the second one is, I think, the liability. What's happening if this goes wrong? I think there is also in the pilot regime written of the liability when something is not going appropriate. Then there is a big liability for that. And I think all these points, I think, are leading to the institutions why they step back and watch first. I think so. From my point of view, talking to the financial institutions in Austria.
Just kind of tying together what all of you said, especially Jan and Holger, I would say, regarding the thresholds of the DLT pilot regime. This is obviously one of the reasons, having those thresholds, such as the total market capitalization that you can have as a issuer, that is quite low. Then you have other ones regarding the total capitalization of those stocks or bonds that you can issue, and so on. So that's what's keeping other institutions that are quite new into entering the market, and thus only the established ones even have a shot at doing the investment, Holger, that you were talking about in the long-term commitment. So interesting to see the same dynamics on that topic as well. Johannes, regarding the technological approaches to interoperability, we already touched on it. We already said there's some different layers on which you can connect, whether it be TIPS or another one. What are some of those considerations? What are those approaches to making wholesale CBDCs interoperable with one another right now?
So regarding what we know now from the ECB exploratory phase, there are 3 solutions. As mentioned before, the Banque de France full DLT solution, the German Bundesbank trigger solution, and the hash link with Banca d'Italia. So all these are the first phase with concentrate on the interoperability test. So the market participants, they come up with the asset DLT connecting to the cash DLT provided by these solution providers, and all these 3 are, as far as I know, based on APIs now. So it's a standardized technology via the APIs for DVP settlement use cases, PVP receiving versus payment use cases are at the moment, as far as I know, based on APIs.
Perfect. Any additional remarks on that topic of technological interoperability?
Yeah, it's also a big question. So I think, I mean, what Johannes described are the, let's say, the CBDC solutions. But of course, what's more interesting is what's the form of the, let's say, receiving system. So because I mean, from a central bank perspective, they offer an API and we just can connect. But as Johannes was saying, that we see a lot of fragmentation when it comes to the networks used for different kind of consortium, different kind of network of banks. So, and I think that's also interesting development, that there's a lot of fragmentation. So therefore it's not easy also when you say, let's say like Banque de France, we have a full DLT system. They will also ask participants, okay, what's the network we should use? Which networks are you using? And then they will get a lot of different answers. So, and that was Holger was saying, like, there's no standard yet. We haven't agreed on, do we really want to go on public blockchain or do we want to stay on permission blockchain? That's also a question to the industry, not to the central banks. The central banks will be, I think, at least some of the system which they build are agnostic, but it's more a question to the industry. And also then how is that interoperable? So imagine you issued a bond on a permission blockchain and someone else issued the bond on a public blockchain and they want to do a repo transaction. How should that work? So then you need a gatekeeper who to, you know, it's so, and I think that's also where we currently lack standardization, or maybe that's the way how it is. So we need to live with it. Yeah, so that's when it comes to interoperability, definitely to a concern, I think.
And to maybe add on, Jan, as you say, that's why I think in the future, using this technology, there will be new roles. You know, the old traditional role like a CSD, what we now have that Clearstream or that. I personally think they may have new roles in the future in this landscape. As you said, there was even you using DLT, that you have still a lot of challenges, yeah, like interoperability, gateway, and I think here in that case, institutions like this, they could play a role to make the quality secure, to secure the quality that everything works well. So I think there will be new roles coming, old roles maybe will be changed, and that's quite very exciting to see how this changes in the future.
Yeah, banks are certainly under a lot of scrutiny in those times, not only with wholesale CBDCs, but also retail ones, as is often discussed.
But imagine we have, I think we touched a little bit on this, we have an international network of wholesale CBDCs. So now you can imagine how complex that will be. I mean, I think we discussed cross-border payments. So, but I mean, coordinating between banks locally, it seems already to be a challenge. But now imagine you need to coordinate central banks globally on what should be the network where we should exchange wholesale CBDCs on between each other. Yeah? So then it generates another layer of governance and stuff. So that's definitely also interesting. I mean, there's the mBridge project, and the BIS, of course, has different initiatives on discussing, does it make sense to set standards when it comes to CBDCs initiatives globally? So, but again, I mean, if we want also to have efficiency between the central banks, we need to have like a common infrastructure where these things settle. And usually these kind of discussions end at least either in country border or on, let's say, on the border of the area where the central bank basically is responsible for. So to have this on a global level, it's super challenge to have it. And looking forward to see what BIS, hopefully they solve it, or maybe they solve it, I don't know. But that's a big challenge. And but if this, for example, would be generated, then the next question is, what's the role of the banks? But that's maybe we leave it for later. That's also a question. Huh?
But thank you, Jan. You mentioned the BIS. That's what they do. They are they have a big consortium, the BITS Innovation Hub, and there are lots of streams, and all the central banks, they coming together and exchanging and so on. Also, they try to encourage projects like mBridge project, or I think it was Jura between Banque de France and Swiss National Bank for cross-border settlement. All these initiatives are done by the BIS, and I think this is very important because the worldwide, so many countries, so many central banks looking at their domestic market. You need a supranational institution that bring all them together, and that's why you mentioned BIS is something very important what they do, and very, very good for this technology that they bind all the players together.
Yeah, exactly. I think they are one of the only ones out there that have put together an overview of all wholesale efforts that are going on around the world, and seeing where they stand and so on. So let's leave that decision up to them. That's certainly a really big question, and maybe something that has to be decided top down. Otherwise, there's lack of acceptance and fragmentation there. Coming to the last question, that is not a, I was about to say customer question, but an audience question. According to you and your insights that you have given your position, when do you think we can expect a wholesale CBDC to move from a pilot to the actual realization phase? Obviously, maybe answer it regarding the eurozone, and then also worldwide. When do you think we can expect the first news to come out? Kevin, you look eager to answer first.
Well, that's a glaze in the crystal ball. Well, maybe we can compare it to a retail CBDC, like in the eurozone, the digital euro. Officially, it should be public in 2027. I mean, let's wait, but that's the plan of the ECB. So the question is, will we have a wholesale CBDC? Or for me, the question is, will we have a wholesale CBDC before or after the digital euro? I would guess after the digital euro, so after the retail CBDC, because first, as the other participants mentioned, the business cases have to be specified, and currently all the power and energy of the legislator, and of course, if there is a wholesale CBDC, as Jan mentioned, many legislative documents has to be adapted. Maybe you need a new legislation. So I don't know, but maybe it's not just a task of the ECB, but also of the European Commission, of the European Parliament. And if you see this process, I would guess, but I don't take bets, that the wholesale CBDC will come after retail CBDC in Europe.
I would fully agree with Kevin, due to the fact that there's a lot of compromises have to be found, because it's from the political side, it's a thing you have to go on. You have to find a solution which is any of the political fragmentations will agree on, and we have to finance it, because it will cost a lot of money to really not only to make a plan and a sandbox, but really to ramp up a new a system which has the highest liability and security standards which can be found. So I think if we see them in the 20s years, yeah, we should be happier. But to be honest, for me, it's not the real question when the wholesale CBDC will come. The question is if there's a clear goal on the way to find one, because from a security services perspective, we can handle a lot of things in between, using DLT technology, getting in favor of any of the efficiency gains, up to the point having a real central bank money on ledger. But also there are many steps in between which we can go and we can improve our system. So it's not the question when it comes, it's more or less the question when will be there a decision to really build one. And I hope that in 2 years' time or so we will have this decision.
So maybe my view is I was actually much more optimistic, to be honest, and I thought maybe it will come quite soon. And the reason is that the systems are already built, isn't it? So I mean, so if you compare it to the digital euro, that's just been paperwork so far, isn't it? So and for the wholesale CBDC, I mean, there is exploration phase next year. It's productions, live transactions. So therefore, I think I was actually more optimistic that the wholesale CBDC will come earlier than we thought, because there's not so much risk, isn't it? So, and it's the central bank's still in charge of the infrastructure. They can decide who gets access to this infrastructure. So I was actually hoping this will get much easier than at the retail CBDC, which of course requires a lot of questions to be answered, also political and legal questions. So my hope was it will actually come far before the retail CBDC, but I don't know. We will see.
Just one remark. I'm pretty sure that this could happen if any of the large national banks will agree on using the Banque de France setup. Because this is the only DLT setup you have. Any other solution, the tip solution or other trigger solution, are no wholesale CBDC solutions. These are only trigger solutions, full stop. Banque de France has the only really token-based solution. So if any of the national banks agree on that, then it could be much faster. But I'm not that optimistic that the politicians will be able to solve this problem very soon. But
now Johannes, right. he knows when it will come.
No, I have not a crystal ball. So I think the question to realization is the big question is still that the business cases, the more, because even you have this, you need the users. Right, so you need the institutions using it, so, and they will use it if they have enough business cases. So this is the circle. So I think this is the depends really, because you have the asset leg and a cash leg, so it's going hand in hand. So the asset leg, that it plays a big role, that you have enough business cases that makes sense for the participants using tokenized assets and so on, scalability, all these factors. We are looking at it at the moment actively with participants, and still there are lots of questions, but the thing is, there are more and more innovation there, like NFT market to DeFi and digital custodian business. All these new business cases are coming up that could be very interesting. This, of course, would help the argument using the wholesale CBDC on DLT because there are business cases. And the second point is what I think is, worldwide, all the central banks, including us, so we invest a lot of efforts on it, on wholesale CBDC. Also here, we have here set up one 90 minutes discussion on this topic. I mean, it costs all efforts and investments. So I don't think that the point will come, okay, tomorrow we stop that all worldwide because it's not necessary, and they invested so much on it. So so I think it's an ongoing process, but the time is hard to say. But I think it's depending really on the business cases coming up. So this is also one of the main questions we are discussing with our market participants within the Delphi stakeholder group. It's all sessions we are discussing about new business cases, how to calculate the business cases that really justify the investment in a DLT. When you have the assets, then of course it's easier than to justify or argumenting using the cash leg on a DLT.
So to summarize, the big question is if, not necessarily when. Then Jan put it quite smartly by contrasting the retail CBDC to the wholesale CBDC, saying we might see that one sooner, meaning it could also be delayed on the retail CBDC side of things. So that was very diplomatic. Let's move on to our audience's questions for today. But in the interest of time, however, I think we're only going to get to one of them, which is, what do you think about a single DLT solution for worldwide? Sorry, I'm going to reread that again. What do you think about a single DLT for worldwide CBDC solutions? So it's not necessarily talking about the interoperability of individual CBDCs, but rather having one DLT for everyone.
So may I start first? So another question: why not using a central database then in that case? Yeah, what is in that case when you have one single DLT? Okay, but I don't think that's gonna happen because you have a fragmented landscape. Yeah, I think Asia, they are building they have their own innovation. The United States, we in Europe, and all other countries all over the world, and all of them they want to of course establish their DLT. So I don't think this could happen. But coming back, in that case, one single DLT, why not using one central database? It's cheaper, easier, and much more faster, definitely.
So in other words, you think it's unlikely. The general idea theoretically makes sense. It's just a matter of comparing theory to the reality of things and interests of states.
I mean, my view is so, and this goes back a little bit, and people know about my favor for the all-in concept and also the unified ledger idea. So the question is, should we have one network for CBDCs or should we have one network for commercial bank money and CBDCs? So because if we just have a network where the CBDCs live, let's say, on a single infrastructure, where should the commercial bank money infrastructure lie? Is this a parallel universe or should it be merged? Because then we would have the most benefits, isn't it? If we would be able to move commercial bank money and central bank money on the same infrastructure. I think that would ultimately be as I believe, the smartest way. But as Johan is saying, I mean, this is a big task, not just to have central bank money and commercial bank money on the same infrastructure, which itself is a big task. But I mean, to have this globally, of course, is huge idea. But I think I mentioned earlier, so I mean, CBDC is just the central bank money side. I mean, the innovation also comes on the commercial bank money side, which essentially at the end needs to settle in central bank money. So therefore both worlds need to merge, I believe, or needs to come together somehow. Otherwise, we have more separation, and I think that's also an aspect. So we shouldn't forget about that more. I mean, interbank money is wholesale CBDC. That's correct. But I mean, all of the movements of money between financial institutions or corporates, etc., end at the end in central bank money settlement. So therefore, if we tokenize deposits or commercial bank money, then we need to find a way also to settle into central bank money, and so therefore we shouldn't forget there's a commercial bank money world.
Kevin, do you have anything to add to the question regarding a unified CBDC solution?
Yeah, I just can agree with Jan and Johannes, especially that we also should consider the commercial bank money token, because of course currently wholesale CBDC, it's between banks, there is no discussion. But sometimes, and I don't want to speak of the devil and then the devil shows up, sometimes some people also think about to open or to use a wholesale CBDC for businesses. And imagine what would happen if all the commercial finances are going away from the banks. I mean, I don't want to speculate about it, and what it would mean for our monetary system. We would go from a two-stage monetary system to a actually centralized monetary system. I don't say that it will come. I don't think so, but there are some ideas. A wholesale CBDC among the commercial bank money token should be fostered. But about the unified ledger internationally, I think I agree with Johannes. It's very unrealistic if you see the history of international corporations and agreements. There are so many political forces and different opinions and different motivations. Yeah, I don't think so.
I'm not saying the unified ledger idea is impossible. I'm just saying it's a big task. And just a joke, I guess your sponsor asked this question, isn't it?
I can't speak to who asked the question, but it's not in the realm of impossibilities. Yeah, any closing remarks on this question, Holger?
No, I'm a scientist and I'm physicist from my educational stuff, so I can imagine any kind of rationale behind having one network at the end, but I'm too realistic to think that this point will really have to be done, that any of these consolidations, any of these standardizations will really be done on the globally. I wouldn't assume that. I would assume that we will see different kind of networks, either for different kind of purposes, either for geographical reasons, and so therefore, if you really be open for in your infrastructure, be open for being interoperable as far as possible, as far as reasonable, then it's quite an important thing. And I'm a 10 years time now. I think I'm in the foray of ME-SECO, and one thing which brings the entire consolidation to the end is the tax feature. Because tax is a regional thing, geographical driven, and there is no influence from outside to this topic. And so there that huge amount of different kind of topics. And although if you can say, oh, technically I can handle any of these, this brings nearly any consolidation to a breaking point. But this is far away. I think there are regional aspects which for the next decades, at least 2 decades, I don't see that there's a consolidation on one layer possible.
All right, I think that's a good stopping point for today's panel. We've exchanged a lot of thoughts on the ifs and whens of wholesale CBDCs. Discussions such as this one are, of course, going to take place, obviously, online at the DIA on a regular basis, but also at the Digital Euro Conference 2024 that's coming up on February 29th. So if you haven't already, then make sure to check out our website where you can currently book your tickets either for online streaming or on-site, where not just some of our panelists from today, but also even more people, and specifically also banks, are going to be present, and you're going to be able to exchange with them in person. With that being said, a big thank you to all of our panelists for today. I personally learned a lot from you guys, as usually or always the case, actually. So I greatly enjoy just getting to ask the questions on events like these and listen in for the rest of the time. So thank you for your day. I hope you have a great rest of your evenings, and goodbye until next time.
Thanks very much.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
Bye. Bye.